Thank you all for your patience and thank you for joining us for the first webinar of our Fall 2024 Living Well Wednesday series. I am Jennifer LaSalle, the Family and Community Wellness Agent for the West Plains Extension District, and I will be your host today. The virtual series is focused on a wide variety of essential skills that empower you and your family. During this presentation, please be respectful and open to others throughout the presentation. Feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box or into the chat box. The Q&A has an anonymous features, so feel free to utilize this if you wish. Our chat monitors will watch closely to make sure your questions are answered. Today's presentation will be posted to our Living Well Wednesday homepage. We encourage you to go visit this to see past webinars we've covered. Next slide. K-State Research and Extension is an equal opportunity employer. Therefore, we do not discriminate against anyone. If there is a special request or concern to allow you to participate in our programs, please reach out to us. We are really excited today to welcome our presenters, Melinda Daly, Extension Agent from the Sunflower District, and Teresa Hatfield, Extension Agent from Meadowlark Extension District. The presentation today is Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate? This is a great program that provides research-informed practical strategies to protect your family relationships when passing on personal possessions. And with that, I will turn it over to Melinda and Teresa.
Hello and welcome all you participants out there. I'm glad that we got it figured out and we're ready to go. So I hope you learned a lot out of the Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate. During this program, we will be discussing a topic that few families escape: decisions about a lifetime of accumulated possessions in later life. You will be learning about 6 key factors critical for successful property decisions. Almost all individuals have valued personal belongings that have meaning for you and other family members. This program focuses on the distribution and transfer of personal possessions. When someone moves or dies, who will get all the treasures that we have, like wedding rings, family photo album, maybe even grandpa's fishing pole? This is an issue that impacts families regardless of income, assets, or cultural contact. Inheritance decisions include dealing with 2 major types of property that individuals accumulate over their life course: titled and non-titled property, such as land, a home, certificates of deposit. However, they are often ignore their non-titled possessions. Non-titled property includes all the stuff that we have at our house that we accumulate. Here are some examples. Emotional value only are like things like blocks that a child played with while they were growing up. Another one is financial only, and that's like dad's gun collection. Some people might want that. Both emotional and financial could be grandfather's gold watch that had been passed down to the oldest son in the generations. Another one is neither emotional or financial, and that's like Aunt Ruth's paintings. Decisions about both types of property are important. Evidence suggests that most adults have not planned ahead in regard to either one. A majority of individuals die without a legal will. So you need to be thinking about that. When there is a lack of planning and communication, too often results in conflicts inaccurate assumptions, wishing you would have had critical conversations, not knowing if you are carrying out a property owner's wishes, and the loss of valued possessions. And I personally have gone through some of these things with my family, both my family and my husband's now. So let's go to the next slide. Role of possessions. In this quote, an adult daughter shares the deep meaning and experience of dealing with the loss of her mom, the family home, and the lifetime of possessions. And I think that's a really good saying there. And don't forget, if you guys have anything you want to put in the chat, you have a question, just put it in the chat and we'll get it answered later. It's not uncommon for estate planning books to recommend putting one line in your will that says, divide my possessions equally among my children's heirs. What do you think? Would that work in your family? I don't know. If you want to put something in the chat, you can. I know for some it wouldn't work at all, but let us know what your thoughts are. Non-title transfers are too often assumed to be matter of fact, easy, and simple. That is far from reality for many families. This can be the most often source of family conflict. Holding on and letting go are much about memories and grieving the loss of the owner and complex family relationships as about objects. For some family members, deciding about the distribution of the parents' possessions can be the last straw in a long history of conflict and struggles. So it's not always easy. Sometimes it can be, but not always. Inheritance decisions carry powerful messages and consequences, especially for family relationships like parent-child, siblings, extended family. Have you thought about extended family? Transfers can be symbols of trust, love, power, control, favorites, rewards, and punishment, if you think of it that way. Messages of mom always liked you the best might come up. For example, how might a son feel if the father leaves a watch to a son-in-law when that watch has been passed on for 3 generations? How would that person feel? Decisions about inheritance offer insight into who counts in the family or kinship network, who's in or out, or has status. That is, parents deciding who is in or out, and not based on legal definition of family, but from the real definition. Okay, and now we'll turn it over to Teresa.
All right, I'm going to be talking to you about the 6 key decision-making factors. So there's really no magic formula for making decisions about personal possessions. What's been learned from research and listening to family members is that there are 6 key factors influencing the transfer of non-titled property. So those factors are the sensitivity of the issue, the lack of goal discussion, different perceptions of fairness, different meanings of objects, lack of awareness of distribution options and consequences, and the potential for conflict. When family members address these 6 factors, successful and positive transfers are more likely to occur. We will be discussing each of these factors today. Okay, so next slide. The first factor is understanding how the sensitivity of the issue is for this topic. Okay, so I think we have a hard time talking about it because we don't like to talk about mortality. We live in a society that avoids topics related to death or dying, but the reality is that we're all going to die someday. Planning for what happens to possessions when a loved one needs to downsize because of deteriorating health or when a loved one dies means we have to acknowledge the painful realities of loss of independence and of death, and families all have to face this reality. There is a potential for conflict. Bringing up issues of who should get what can be especially sensitive when there are estranged family members, siblings who've never gotten along, or a parent and an adult child who find little in common. The potential for conflict is high when there has been a history of challenging family relationships. And then family secrets. Decisions about possessions can involve revealing family secrets. For example, you learn that dad has given his book collection to a daughter that he gave up for adoption, and it has never been discussed before. Nobody in the family knew that. The topic
ready
can
for-
be sensitive because of sensitive concerns. Oh, let's see.
You need it on another one.
Yeah, click on the next slide, sorry.
Are we good there?
Fear, yes. The topic can be sensitive because of concerns of fears or how one's motives might be interpreted. Concerns of fears are very real for both the receivers of the possessions, typically young adult children and grandchildren, and the givers, the older parents that are the property owners. So here are some examples of reactions of both the givers and the receivers. Receivers may feel that they're just greedy or want control. Givers may be surprised or dismayed and hurt by the responses from intended recipients. We don't have room for anything, Mom, or I already have a house full of dishes, or it's just something I wouldn't use. Fear, and there's also fear that keepsakes will not be used. Other times they mention things like, I don't have anything of value. Just because nobody has asked you about your property does not indicate a lack of interest. Or I'm too young to worry about death. If you choose not to make your own decisions, somebody is going to make them for you. Okay, next slide. So for beginning conversations about inheritance, we need to consider who needs to talk, who needs to be included in the conversations over time. It's not uncommon for spouses or partners, despite many years of marriage, to have different expectations and opinions about personal possessions. Many parents want to involve their adult children in the conversation when planning ahead, and others choose to inform adult kids after the decision has been made. Next one. So the second one we're going to talk about is a lack of goals. Okay, the next slide. So another key factor in identifying what you want to accomplish when distributing or transferring your personal possessions is to understand what your goals are. Too often goals remain unidentified or unspoken. Research has identified 5 common goals that families often focus on when distributing property. So the first one on here is maintaining privacy. Goals here might include keeping decisions private within the family or avoiding public auctions or court cases. Some older adults are adamant about not having their possessions displayed out for all to see, and some could care less. So looking at how you feel about your possessions and whether or not, you want that kept in the family, or maybe you don't mind if everything's sold in an auction, depending on what that is. And if you want to maintain your privacy, you definitely want to avoid court interaction. The next one is protecting or improving family relationships. This is a goal that many families have, and they might include avoiding major family feuds, tug of wars, years of not talking. So these are pretty high on the list. So you want to make sure everybody's still talking to each other by the time all of this happens. Work out those disagreements and conflicts that they may have. And family members cooperate to make sure that those decisions are made. Um, Family members agree what I want to do with family belongings, and they can be open and honest about items received, given and received. Being fair is also a common statement heard from family members, but it's like, what does fair mean? So this goal often does not have a common meaning, and we're going to talk about that in a little more detail here in just a bit. Preserving memories. Objects are often involved in important family rituals, traditions, or celebrations, which means that they're clearly tied to memories and respect for the owner. So one of the things that I think is important with this one is if you don't tell somebody about what an item is and what it means to you, they're not going to know. And unless you're communicating that with your family, they're not going to know whether something has some important family memories. So it's a good idea maybe to write those things down in a journal or include that with the item. We're going to be talking about how to distribute things later on, but sharing those memories and communicating that with your family is so important. Another goal is contributing to society. Some givers will want to focus on leaving a legacy by contributing their items maybe to charity, museums, or a specific cause. I know my grandpa was a woodworker and he had a lot of things that he created. And there were several Noah's Ark carvings that he had made for all of the grandkids, and we all had one of them. And after he passed away, we found several more. Well, so what we did was we gave it to the Kiwanis Club that he belonged to, and they had a silent auction for him to raise money for the club. So those are kinds of some things that you might keep in mind as some goals. But this could also mean that some financially valuable collections might be sold or donated to an organization versus going to the family members. Okay, next slide. Okay, the third decision-making factor is recognizing the complexity of what is fair. So I'd kind of like to start this off by reading a little story and think about how you would feel if this were happening to you. When my mom died, my sisters and I already had graduated from high school and left home. Several years later, Dad remarried and his new wife moved into our home. When Dad died, many of the items that belonged to my parents stayed in the house with my stepmother. Once she died, all of our parents' belongings and the memories that went with them went to my stepmom's children. We still feel hurt and angry when we see the milk glass candy dish from our family at our stepsister's house. The dish was given to my parents as a wedding gift. It's not fair. Why should she have it? So being fair is often described as an important goal when making decisions about both financial assets and personal possessions, but what does it really mean? A critical step in making decisions about transferring property and possessions is to sort out what fair means in the context of your family. Most family members have unwritten and often unspoken rules about who should get what and how the decision should be made. Individuals will have different perceptions of what is fair. When transferring non-titled property, fairness issues emerge in both the outcomes, who gets what, and the process, what methods are used to distribute the items. If family members feel the process has been fair, they are typically more willing to accept the outcome. Okay, so here we have another little story. Usually if I have a live class, I'll ask you to think about who should get this item that we're going to talk about and why. So I'll have you do that as you listen to this. Here's a family situation. The oldest daughter explains, recently my parents died within 3 months of each other. They had a will, but had not made decisions about their family, or not made decisions about their personal possessions. My sister, brother, and I have been going through the house and making decisions about who gets what. It's gone pretty smoothly. There's only one item in the whole house that all three of us want. It's the Winnie the Pooh book that Mom and Dad read to us each night when we were young. It has always been kept in the living room on the corner bookshelf. So here we have three siblings. We've got an oldest daughter. She's 48. She's divorced, remarried with two stepchildren she's raising. We have another daughter who's 46 and single. And then we have a son, 44, and married with one child. So think about right now, how would you decide who should get that Winnie the Pooh book? And I don't know if you guys want to put that in the chat. We can kind of look at some of those options and see who do you think should get that. So do we have anything in the chat that kind of tells us what people are thinking?
Joe said that would be a tough call, maybe the oldest. Or Janet said, which child reads the most?
Okay,
They could share the book. Whoever has young children could use it first, and then as great-grandchildren come along, they could continue to pass it along. Somehow share and eventually get it to the son with one child. Who has done the most care for the parents, that person might get the book.
okay.
The son should get the book to pass on to blood grandchildren. I would go straight to a random drawing.
So all those are really good creative ideas on how we could pass that along. The daughter said that eventually what they decided to do was, for now, the book's going to stay where it's always been. The brothers moved into the house and we get together a lot. So they're going to leave it there because they really can't figure out what to do with it. So I think it's okay to have some of these creative ideas. You know, all families are different in how they would handle the situation. And you know, if I was able to talk with you guys, I'm sure you would have a lot of stories to tell me about how your family handled some of these tough situations and how you were creative in handling it. So some of the common transfer rules that we have, let's go to the next slide. Think about some of the rules that you've seen in your family or other families when personal property is transferred. One approach is to focus on treating everyone the same. So that's equality. The challenge with the personal possessions is it's impossible to literally divide them equally, such as that Winnie the Pooh book. You can't split the book in half and have it still be that valuable thing that you want. Family members need to be creative when they're trying to achieve some sense of being equal. So it's quite common, for example, to focus on creating an equal chance of receiving possessions through drawing straws, using monopoly money to stand in for real money. That way you can even out those socioeconomic differences that people have if you use like that, if you use the monopoly money. Other things you can do to be creative. I know my grandmother had her wedding ring with one large diamond and several small ones in it. When she passed away, my mom and her sister took the ring to a jeweler and told them to create two sister rings, and they had to buy an additional large diamond, and they did not want to know which diamond, who got the original diamond. So that was just kind of a creative way that they thought of to divide things. Let's go on to the next one. The next one's talking about being equitable. So another common approach is to focus on taking the differences of receivers into account. And somebody mentioned that in the chat. That's called being equitable. So you're looking at needs, personal characteristics, or contributions. They can be physical needs, mental or health, or economics. So a person might want to give some more maybe things to somebody that is less well off than maybe another sibling. So personal characteristics of receivers are another rule used to determine who gets what with personal possessions. Most owners want to know that their possessions are going to someone who cares about the objects and finds it meaningful. I think that's probably the scariest thing right now is we have a lot of people that have items they love, like their china, their silver, and then the younger generation is used to more informal settings and things like barbecues and things instead of like sit down dinner parties. So, but they still want those items that they love to go to someone that they know will care about them. And so I think that's a lot where some of this creativity can come in and what you do with some of those things. So sometimes personal characteristics are out of one's control. Like if you're the oldest, you really can't change that. Or if you're the youngest, you can't change that. But you know, you need to take that into effect when you're really thinking about things. Okay, so go to the next one. So another attempt to be equitable is to recognize difference in contributions. Contributions can be counted in different ways, and this can be complicate the situation. So we have another situation here where she says that in her family, everybody knows that you get back gifts that you've given when someone dies, except for money and time, that is. I'm the daughter who lives near mom and dad, and I take care of them. Well, I take them to their doctor's appointment, clean their houses, and help them out financially. My sister from back east is always sending expensive gifts for birthdays and holidays. Who do you think will get back the most when mom and dad die? So that's another thing. Let's put some examples in the chat. How do you think we should resolve this one? I think this one's maybe a little bit tougher than the Winnie the Pooh book.
Joe says to give evenly.
Okay. Yeah, this one might take a little more creative thought, you know, on how to do this. You know, you don't know whether that sister that's the caregiver is has very much, and then, you know, the other sister is given a lot.
Says not healthy to compare lives and lifestyles. It honestly depends on the expensive gifts. If they sent a lift chair, is the sister going to want it back from afar? The person who helped them most, the daughter actually taking care of them probably deserves more. And then look at it as though who got the most while parent were alive compared to what is given after death.
Okay, so yeah, lots of things to think about there. You know, somebody makes a homemade gift too. It's like some of those can be kind of valuable. Who gets those back afterwards? So lots of things to consider when we're thinking about what is fair. Okay, next slide. Is the process fair? Yeah. Don't forget to also determine what the fair process will mean in your family. Many family members are more concerned about the process than the outcomes. And if they perceive the process as fair, they're more willing to accept the outcome, even though it may not be something that they exactly agree with. So what does the fair process look like? The following issues are important for family members to discuss and determine what makes sense for their situation. So participation, who's in or out? Do you include in-laws? Do you include friends in this process? You know, maybe you don't have a big family and so you have to include other people outside of the family. Is the process, is the playing field level? Is there consistency with how you make your decisions? Respect and dignity, how is everybody treated? Information, is your information accurate and complete? When, where, and how, and the ability to correct the process if problems arise. Okay. So next, keep in mind what criteria people commonly use to judge if a thing is unfair. It lacks accuracy, information, value, and meaning. Grandma promised a certain rocker to a grandchild, but when the aunt insisted, she was taking it no matter what. That doesn't really seem fair to us, does it? Okay. Moral or ethical standards are not followed. One of my sister took the items when she thought nobody was looking. Eek. Or not everyone has a voice in the decision. The most dominant personalities walk off with everything they want, and others are left with what they don't want. Okay. Next slide. Okay, rules are not consistently followed. My brother was in the garage taking tools when the sisters returned from the church after a funeral. And not representative subgroups, so like siblings, in-laws, grandchildren. On the grandchildren one, I was sent to represent my husband when things were doled out before the sale and was told I wasn't included because I was an in-law. So just a few things to keep in mind. Remember the differences of perception, that what's fair are normal among families, and what you think is fair may not be what your children think is fair. And so really it's a good idea to talk about what fair means in your family. What are the outcomes and what's the process? And, determine when people disagree, that's okay. But I think the key to all of this is having really great communication with your family. And that's going to help reduce those misunderstandings and inaccurate assumptions. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Melinda to talk about the last three.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, so the third one here is different meanings of objects. So objects have different meanings for everybody, the value and the different for different individuals. A person might receive a table that has no special meaning, but one of the sisters thinks it's important to her because she remembers playing games on the table and other things. The other person would just sell it for $1,000 and take a trip. She wants to pass it down to her children or items that no one cares about. So those are really tricky things. I know back on one of the things Teresa was saying, in my husband's family, they had a bowl that was always used, and I'm not sure if it was a great grandma's bowl, but anyway, so at Christmas time before their mother passed, one of the sisters found replicas of the same bowl kind of, and then they drew for it at Christmas, and so everybody has kind of a replica of those things. So sometimes that helps out too. Avoid inaccurate assumptions. Do you know what your pie plates are in your family? Have you ever thought about that? Sometimes identify items that have special meaning. What items? Why important to others? Who should receive and why? Share those stories about meanings, and Teresa talked about that earlier. If you don't share the things that mean the most to you, then nobody will know. So about the pie plates, what possessions have meaning to whom and why? The meaning of items, one topic that families often don't discuss. Take time to share stories and meaningful items while they're alive, while you can make those decisions. The sixth decision is lack of awareness of distribution options. So we'll go to this slide and consider contribution options and consequences. There is no one perfect method of transfer. I don't care what you do. there's no perfect method. More transfers options are available when planned prior to death, so look at some of the options you have. Each method of transfer has consequences. Stay focused on your goals and understand your state inheritance laws. You have to remember those because they're different in all states. So if you question that, you need to talk to a lawyer or talk to somebody that knows. Create a separate list. And I think this one is very interesting. When making decisions about your personal possessions, the recommended approach is to create a legally recognized written list as part of a legal will, explaining who should get what property after your death. Most states allow individuals to simply indicate in their will that they have a separate list. Creating a separate list allows you to change it as you need and not have to go change the whole will. So make sure, though, that you check with your state to see if that's a legal, if they can do that legally, because we'll talk about some more. So samples of separate list is here on this screen, and make sure your list will be clearly understood. List needs to be referred to in the will, in the handwriting of a property owner, or signed by the owner and the date. So you want to make sure and get those things down. Meet with a qualified estate planning attorney to verify what is allowed in your state of residence. So you need to make sure. Options have consequences. So beware though, since some of those options are illegal. Although many people do it, labeling items with names on masking tape or making verbal promises are not legally binding methods of distribution. And so I think you guys need to take that in mind, because some people do that, but it's not binding. Remember, if no plans are in place or wishes known, state laws will apply. Every state has interstate and succession laws describing how property should be divided when there is no will. Another reason for you guys to make your will. The last one is potential for conflict. And it is important to recognize and head off potential sources of conflict. Conflict is often more common when the property owners don't make and communicate property transfer decisions prior to death. So it's good if you do that before death, leaving adult children and others with the responsibility to work it out. Research has identified 4 common sources of conflict that arise with dealing with personal possessions in inheritance decisions. And those are up on the screen: lack of communication or miscommunication, different attitudes, beliefs, or values, different expectations about roles, and unresolved prior conflicts. Manage conflict. Communicate and be transparent in words and actions, being above board with everyone involved. Respect property owners' right to decide, agree to disagree, and involve mediators or third parties. So those are some of the things that you need to do. I believe it is your turn again, Teresa.
Okay, I'm getting myself unmuted here. So addressing the 6 decision-making factors we just reviewed can greatly improve your family inheritance planning and experiences. There are resources that can help you and your family start conversations to begin to address the 6 key factors. One of those resources is the Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate workbook. And it's a friendly workbook that you can use. It's got a lot of good forms in it you can fill out to help you decide what your goals are and what you think is fair. And that video, or I'm sorry, that book is available on the Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate website that you have here on the slide. Oops, I'm sorry, Melinda, I didn't tell you to go forward.
Oh, there you go.
There's the book. Well, there's what the book looks like. And then the next slide has the website where you can access a video and a book. So, and then there's also on that website, there is also it's free, and it also has some quizzes and stories and articles that you can read as well. Okay, so hopefully you had time to write that down. The distribution of a lifetime of accumulated possessions doesn't have to be a family nightmare. Instead, it can be a celebration of a person's life and provide meaningful continuity across the generations. So I hope y'all found this presentation meaningful. We'll stick around to answer any questions that you might have.
If anyone has any questions, they can type them in the chat or put them in the Q&A as well. So. Somebody asked if we can put the link in the chat for the workbook. Yep, there Sherilyn got it.
Okay.
Okay. I moved
The
it back
workbook's
to
really
that.
great. I love the workbook.
Yes.
I don't see any other questions anywhere.
I think this program just really helps you think ahead of time, and especially if there's a big family. In my family, it was my family's small, and so it wasn't hard for me. But for some families, it gets to be kind of a task, I guess.
Yeah, I think everybody too thinks their family will just get along and everything will go smoothly, and that's not always the situation.
Yeah.
I do agree it's helpful though if you can figure things out before you die, because if something's written down, then you know the wishes of that person, and if it's not written down clearly somewhere, then everybody's left to guess. And I think there's some validity in, honoring a person's wishes after they're gone. So I feel like it's easier to do that if it's documented somewhere.
And I do really stress that list that you put in your will and you have it separate. I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Because I've known of people that have done the tape and or told people, and so I just really think that's a really good idea.
Somebody just asked, I was told I need to send off a new car title with a beneficiary or it will be tied up in probate court for years. Is this true?
Oh,
That's a
probate.
it's a titled property question. I would probably refer you to an attorney on that one.
Yeah.
I don't want to tell you the wrong thing.
Yeah. And those of you that are listening, I want you to realize that we as people need to make sure we have those things in line. So if that car was supposed to go to somebody, get the title changed or get their name added to it. So there's many things you can do to help you beforehand. Any other questions? I'm watching the chat too. Well, I want to thank you guys all for coming on today. I think this is a really good and important program for people to listen to. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Melinda and Teresa. Gives good information. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'll hand it back over to you, Jennifer.
All right, thank you. I want to thank all of you for attending and Melinda and Teresa for your awesome presentation. I wish I would have gone through this class before my mother died. We hope you have gained some valuable strategies to help with making decisions and passing on personal family property. So again, thank you all for joining us. We also want to remind you that your opinions are valuable to us, and we would like for you to let us know what your thoughts about today's program. Please complete the survey and share other topics you would like us to cover. Stay tuned for our next webinar on November 13th, covering the topic Fall Proof Your Life, a Guide to Better Balance. Also, be sure to check out our Living Well Wednesday website to view all past webinars. Again, thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Melinda and Teresa.